She almost let it go. She almost looked at what the dog was doing and smiled and moved on with her morning. That would have been the worst mistake of her life. Vivian Hartley photographed weddings for a living. She was trained to read a room, to find the moment inside the moment, to see what was actually happening beneath what appeared to be happening. She was good at it, which is why it bothers her now that she looked at Atlas blocking her son from the utility room door and saw something gentle and playful and completely misread the entire situation. Atlas was a 3-year-old Bernese Mountain Dog, 112 pounds, tricolor coat, black and white with the rust-colored marks above his eyes that made him look like he was always mildly concerned, which, it turned out, he was. He had lived in their home since before their son Cormac arrived and had taken the baby's presence with the composure of a dog who had decided this was now his job. Cormac was 8 months old, green cotton onesie, the kind with the feet snapped in, the kind that always had dried sweet potato on the front bib by 9 a.m. He had started crawling 3 weeks earlier and now moved with the specific urgency of a baby who had recently discovered that the entire world was reachable if you were low enough to the ground and determined enough to get there. On a Thursday morning in January, Vivian was making coffee in the kitchen. She could see the hallway from where she stood. She watched Cormac crawl from the living room toward the utility room at the end of the hall, which housed the water heater and the furnace. The utility room door was open, as it often was in winter, to let the heat circulate slightly. Atlas came from the living room in a single smooth movement and lay down in the hallway directly in front of the utility room doorway, not behind Cormac, in front of him, between the baby and the door. Cormac crawled up to the dog, grabbed a handful of fur, used Atlas's flank to pull himself to sitting, and then began the business of trying to crawl around him. Atlas shifted his body. Cormac changed direction. Atlas moved again. Vivian watched this and smiled. She thought, what a gentle giant. She thought, he's playing a blocking game with the baby. She went back to making coffee. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Over the next 90 minutes, every time Cormac moved toward the utility room door, Atlas repositioned his body between them. Not dramatically, not with any aggression, with the specific, patient, unyielding movement of an animal performing a task he had assigned himself. Cormac began to cry at the frustration of it. Atlas remained in place. He did not look at Cormac. He looked at the doorway. His nose worked in long, slow pulls directed at the utility room interior. Vivian noticed the nose. Atlas didn't sniff things obsessively. He wasn't that kind of dog. He was calm, contained, deliberate in everything. The repeated slow inhaling toward the interior of the utility room struck her as wrong in a way she couldn't immediately name. She walked to the hallway. She stood at the utility room entrance. She didn't smell anything. She looked at the furnace. She looked at the water heater. Everything appeared normal. She reached down and stroked Atlas once. He sat up and pressed his nose toward the interior again, then looked at her. She almost closed the door and went back to her coffee. Instead, she called the gas company. The technician, a man named Dario, 17 years in emergency service, arrived 40 minutes later. He walked into the utility room with his detection meter. It registered in under 30 seconds. There was a hairline fracture in the fitting, where the gas line connected to the furnace heat exchanger. The crack was microscopic, not visible to the eye, not audible, producing no odor detectable to human senses at the concentration present. It had been there long enough for carbon monoxide to be building at a low but steady rate in the enclosed utility room. Had the door remained open and the baby been allowed to spend any extended time crawling near the unit at floor level, where CO accumulates first, being slightly heavier than air, the outcome would have depended entirely on how long the exposure lasted. Dario turned off the main line. He looked at Vivian. "How did you know to call?" he asked. She told him about the dog. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The dog smelled it before your instruments. That's not uncommon. We see this." He shut his notebook and added, "Get the fitting replaced before you turn the heat back on. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Carbon monoxide is odorless to humans. It binds to hemoglobin 240 times more readily than oxygen, displacing it silently and without sensation. Infants are disproportionately vulnerable. Their respiration rate is higher, their body mass is smaller, and they cannot communicate what they are feeling. A dog's olfactory system, operating at a chemical sensitivity thousands of times beyond human threshold, detects the byproducts of incomplete combustion at concentrations that exist well below any human sensory range. Atlas had been lying in that hallway, performing a job that no instrument in the house could perform. He had found the danger, placed himself between it and the smallest member of the family, and held his position for 90 minutes while his owner watched and smiled and called it a game. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Vivian had the furnace replaced that weekend. She had the entire gas line in the house inspected. The fitting had been faulty since installation, a defect so small it would never have triggered any standard safety check. The night the heat came back on, she sat with Cormac on the living room floor and watched Atlas walk to the utility room doorway, press his nose to the threshold once, hold it for 3 seconds, then turn and walk back to the living room. He lay down across the room from the baby, exhaled once, and closed his eyes. The hallway was clear. He knew it. He was done. Vivian sat there and thought about the 90 minutes she had watched him blocking that doorway and seen something sweet and playful, and missed the whole story underneath it. She thought about how close she came to going back to her coffee. She reached across and put her hand on Atlas's side. He didn't wake. He just breathed, slow and steady, the way he always did when the job was finished and the house was safe. What does your dog do that still doesn't make complete sense to you? Drop it below.